Welcome all to a new session on section evolution, and in this presentation we'll be dealing on the course of evolution. Here we intend to find out the different theories that explain origin of life. Origin of life is one of the oldest and the most discussed and thought about process of biology that has engaged the attention of philosophers, scientists, for more than 25 centuries. Many explanations have been attempted from time to time to find solutions and answers to these questions. And here we are going to discuss a few of them. The first one, it is a theory of spontaneous generation, or it is otherwise known as theory of abiogenesis. And it is perhaps the oldest theory about the origin of life. And according to this, life arose spontaneously from non-living components of the environment by natural process. That is, life arose de novo. It's completely new. That is what it means. Okay. Thus, the ancient Egyptians believed that the mud of the Nile River could give rise to living creatures when warmed by the sun. Frogs, toads, snakes, and even crocodiles were believed to arise in this way. Ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle held the view that insects and maggots originated from decaying fish, and fishes originated from mud. Even large and complex animals like rats were believed to have arisen spontaneously from non-living matter. Many other Greek philosophers like Anaximander, Thales, Xenophanes also believed in abiogenesis. This theory of spontaneous generation was widely accepted till the 17th century. However, it was discovered or it was disproved by Fransisco Redi, Lazzaro, Spallanzani, and Louis Pasteur through different experiments conducted by them in 17th, 18th, and 19th century respectively. So, when we speak about the theory of abiogenesis, it simply states that living things originated spontaneously from inanimate objects, and the major supporters were Aristotle, Anaximander, Thales, Xenophanes, etc. And they believed that insects arose from dews, fish and frog from mud, maggots from meat, etc. And the theory was disproved by the experiments conducted by Redi, Spallanzani, and Pasteur. The next one we have is the theory of biogenesis, and the idea that life originated from pre-existing life by reproduction is what is referred as biogenesis. And the theory has obviously its basis on experiments conducted by Redi, Spallanzani, and Pasteur. Fransisco Redi was an Italian physician, and he was the first person to publish the experimental evidence against the concept of spontaneous generation or the abiogenesis. And it was in the year 1668. He placed boiled meat in 3 jars. One he left uncovered as a control, and you can see it over here. It is uncovered. And in the second, it was covered with a parchment cork. And the third one, the third jar, it was covered by a muslin cloth, fine muslin. After several days, flies appeared in the control or the first jar, but none appeared in the second and the third jars. All the flies laid the eggs in the muslin covering the meat. In the third jar, Redi observed that it was only when these eggs fell on the meat that maggots developed inside. From this, he concluded that the flies are not spontaneously generated by the meat itself, but are produced by adult flies that lay their eggs on the unprotected meat here. So, this actually was the first of its kind of an experiment that disproved abiogenesis. Later, the Dutch Anton von Leeuwenhoek observed microorganisms under the microscope in the year 1674, and as a theory of spontaneous generation of larger forms uh, were rejected, some people were tempted to believe that at least the microorganisms discovered by Leeuwenhoek might be spontaneously generated. Hence, a number of attempts were made in the 18th and 19th century to test this hypothesis, especially by scientists like Needham, Spallanzani, etc. But the results were inconclusive. However, Spallanzani's experiment deserves special mention. Okay. Lazzaro Spallanzani was an Italian scientist and priest, and he conducted experiments disproved the abiogenetic theory, and it was in 1765 he came up with the results. Spallanzani subjected decoctions of plant and animal materials to prolonged boiling. Then the vessels containing them were sealed. You can see over here, the sealed and unsealed. This is actually control, and this is the experiment. Okay, so they were sealed, and thus access to air, it was completely prevented. Access of the liquids to the air were completely prevented. According to Spallanzani, air carried the microorganisms, and he found that if the existing microorganisms in the flasks were killed by boiling, so boiling, as per Spallanzani, boiling can kill the microbes in the liquid. So the microorganisms were killed by boiling, and once it is sealed, no air can get inside, and the air contained microorganisms. So obviously there were no entry of microorganisms into the broth. And then the contents of the flask would not putrefy or would not decompose. Okay, and living organisms will not appear in them. So here you can see the broth is there. It is heated in both the cases. Okay, in the first one it is left open, and so the liquid inside, or what you call the decoction, is in contact with the air. The air contains microorganisms, so the microorganisms may have got deposited in the decoction, and after some days you can see the growth of microorganisms in them. But unlike that, in the sealed containers, that is the container which contain the broth, once it is heated, the microorganisms get killed, and when it is closed, no contact with air happens. Thus, there is no microorganisms deposited in the broth. After some days, you can see even then the decoction is not putrefied. But if it is open and kept for some time, automatically the microorganisms in the air gets deposited, and putrefaction commences, and the growth of microorganisms can be observed. So this experiment obviously shows that it is not de novo. Origin of life is never de novo. It comes from or it's pre-existing. Now, further, you can see that the theory of spontaneous generation was disproved by the famous experiments conducted by Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur was a French chemist, and in his experiment in 1862, he half filled a flask with sugar and powdered yeast. Okay, this flask you are familiar with, is in a round bottom flask. So such a flask was taken, and he took sugar and powdered yeast. Okay, and half filled the flask. And what he did then is he drew out. Okay, this the neck of the flask was drew into an S-shaped curve. Here you can see. Okay, this is what he did, and the neck of the flask, it was like drew into a S-shaped curve in a plane, and its contents were then boiled. Here you can see. Okay, after the drawing of the neck into S-shaped curve, he boiled the contents inside the flask, and its contents were boiled till strong current of steam issued through the side tube. Okay, so once it is boiled, obviously steam will be produced. The steam will move through this neck. Okay, It was found that the contents of the flask remained unchanged even after several days, although the end of the side tube was left open in the air. Even if it is kept open, there were no petrification happening inside. Okay, and Pasteur reasoned that microorganisms that entered the flask from the atmosphere were trapped on the walls of the side tube, and so they failed to reach the broth in the flask. However, when the neck was broken, you can see here when the neck or the stem is broken, the broth inside it comes in contact with the air which contain the microorganisms, and this dust particles could settle directly into the broth, and soon microorganisms start appearing in the broth. It starts to grow. So Pasteur's experiment invalidated the interpretation of spontaneous generation. And from these experiments, obviously, grew the idea that all life came from pre-existing life, and that is the biogenetic theory or biogenesis. Uh, Obviously, this never proved how the first life originated on Earth. It only proved that life can originate only from a pre-existing life. But the first life, how it was originated, could not be proved or could not be, that question was not addressed in the theory of biogenesis. Okay. Now, the next theory is the theory of special creation. According to this view, life was believed to have been created by some supernatural power, either once or at successive intervals. Successive intervals are just once in the creation was made. Organisms never changed after their creation. That is what what the assumption was according to this theory. And the first chapter of Genesis in the Bible records that God created all species in 6 days, in the very form as they are now. And the Spanish priest, Father Soros, was one of the greatest advocates of the biblical version of special creation. And the theory of special creation did not satisfy everyone as it is outside the realm of science to investigate. However, it remained valid until the middle of 19th century when it was replaced by the doctrine of evolution. Obviously, special creation never takes into account the concept of evolution. So, since the ideas of spontaneous regeneration and special creation were rejected, scientists and philosophers were left without an answer to the question of the origin of life for a number of years. Okay, and then we had the theory of cataclysm or theory of catastrophism. According to this, periodic catastrophes or like disasters like maybe floods or earthquakes or something like that. Okay, such kind of periodic catastrophes led to the destruction of existing organisms, followed by the repopulation of the area by migration or by recreation if the catastrophes were worldwide. But what happens is here this particular theory argues that the universe is unchangeable like non-living matter. Okay. However, here again, what happens? This theory the theories were not accepted, and this led to the development of cosmozoid theory. Okay, the theory of panspermia. This theory was proposed by Richter in 1865, and according to this theory, the original spores of life, which is referred as cosmozoa, and that is how the name cosmozoic theory came up. Okay, so the original spores of life was referred as cosmozoa, and cosmozoa reached the Earth accidentally from some other planets of the universe. On getting favorable conditions on the Earth, these cosmozoa developed into organisms, and these spores might have reached the Earth either by floating in the atmosphere, or through meteorites, or by the pressure from the stellar rays. So the cosmozoic theory is completely unsatisfactory for various reasons. One, the intense cold, extreme dryness, and the lethal conditions of interstellar space would not permit even the most resistant spores to survive in the universe. Secondly, actually in the space. Okay. Secondly, the theory, instead of explaining the origin of life, just transfers the origin of life from Earth to some other planet. So again, it is not complete. So this was the different theory.